Do you find it disappointing when you spend hours, days, weeks prepping for something for it to happen, and you plan out the scenarios how things may go wrong, and you prep for everything, and suddenly when you're there on site, things go wrong anyway? So I'm going to share with you this experience I have where I spent a lot of time prepping for this convention, and when we got there on the first day, everything just didn't really go as planned, and things didn't really work out quite the way how I wanted to. It ends well, but it was a lot of troubleshooting process that goes through everything. So let's find out together what I'm talking about here and this experience that I'm going through. And I'm sure that many of you can relate to this. This is ArtIsRight. Before we start, subscribe if you're new and hit on the bell icon so you'll be notified every time I upload cool new videos like this. So I'm filming this from an undisclosed location somewhere in Las Vegas, and I'm here for 2022 Wedding and Portrait Photographers International, or WPPI for short. If you're familiar with WPPI, you have gone through it before, you know it's this big trade convention for portrait photographers, wedding photographers, event photographers, or photographers from all different trades coming together to the trade show, to the classes, to learn more, to refine the craft, or think of it as a continuing education for any other career type that requires a certificate or a license to go through. This is like continuing education for photographers, which is really great. Now, all joking aside, I'm saying that I am in an undisclosed location. This is in my hotel room after the first day. And I'm trying out a few different things. Number one, I am filming this on a C-Ray anamorphic lens for full frame camera, and I'm also traveling with the Panasonic S1R. So I'm filming this on the S1R, which I haven't done before. This is the first time. There's a first time for everything. In fact, what's also different about this convention is that the equipment loadout that I have to prep for this entire convention is also very different, because for my role at WPPI, I'm here as a speaker for a platform class talking about photographic monitors and color management, which is a program that is sponsored by BenQ. These are like the longer 1.5 hour program, and I also have a quick short presentation on the trade show floor. I'm doing portfolio reviews, but most importantly, I'm here for BenQ to answer any BenQ customers that may have any questions about color management. I'm also here to demonstrate color management from end to end, meaning that what we're doing at BenQ booth is I am setting up for a simple headshot session. We're shooting the headshot, and what we're doing is that you're seeing the headshot on the BenQ display, and we're printing it on a printer, an inkjet printer on site. And by the way, when I was doing the printing here, the paper that we're using is given to us by Hahnemuller, and I want to thank you, Hahnemuller, for sponsoring the paper that we're using in the booth and everything. I always love their paper, and they're really good fine art papers for printing in general. Anyhow, so we're printing this on a printer, and then we're showing the pictures side by side in a GTI fully color corrected light box. Once we get everything going today, and this is the first day, by the way, everything was smooth. But getting it to this point was a fairly interesting process. So to take us back a few, I would probably say days and weeks, I have been planning this logistically for a very long time. How many sets of inks we're going to need, what kind of cable connections we're going to use, what happens if the setup is going to be different. Because as much as I like to plan for things, and I'm sure some of us are that way too, we know that when we arrive on site, things can change in ways that we would not imagine. And the only thing that you can do at that point in time is to improvise. So there was a lot of improvisation that needed to happen today. So let's start out with some of the personal gear I'm taking with me. Obviously, I am capturing my sound with a Sennheiser MKE2, or the Sennheiser MKE2. Yeah, that's correct. That's the microphone that I'm using right now. But unlike what I usually do in my studio, where I use an AVX wireless, because I'm in Vegas, I'm in a convention center, it doesn't work really well. So what I have done instead is, I'm going to stand up a little bit here, and I am using the Zoom F1 as my voice recorder. So this is doing all the sound recording so that the microphone's close to me, it sounds better. Now my Panasonic S1 is just only capturing the sound, but amazing enough, when I put the memory card into my Zoom F1 when I was leaving home, I didn't check the memory card, I didn't format it. And I also didn't bring a micro SD card with me. These are all the combo mistake that I could have made, right? So that happened. So when I got to the convention, mic'd myself up and everything, going to put this in, going to film some footage, and lo and behold, I found out that Well, the memory card, the micro SD card I have was a dud. It didn't work. And it works with other devices. It works on my computer, and my computer can see it. But for some reason, it just don't want to work in my Zoom F1 recorder. So where are we at? So that failed. That's the first thing that kind of just didn't go as planned. The timing for everything that have happened. So essentially, even though I arrive about like a day and a half early, I end up just being about a day early to help BenQ set up with the booth and to figure out where we're going to put the printer, the light box, and everything to do the printing and to do the headshot. The first thing we did with the printer was to do a head cleaning, because that's important, right? Getting the clean heads and everything. And because this is a printer that has been stored up for close to 2 years, one of the big concern and the big worry is that what happened if the print head won't clean up? And what I have is my friend Kevin, who is so familiar with these things. So he was helping me throughout the entire journey, and I really appreciate his help throughout this process. So thank you so much, Kevin, for coming out to help me. But essentially what he was doing was going through the process, cleaning print heads, and I was thinking about logistic linking up the printers to the computers and everything. Essentially, I'm going to share with you some shots of a setup, but what we have is a setup that works pretty good, but we weren't able to print out, for example, the patch set that we're going to use to do paper profiling, which I'll show you what this looks like. And if you have been following my channel before, you probably know what this looks like. These are all these squares, and we want to do a custom profile for the paper that we're using, which is the PhotoRag Writer 315 GSM, or gram per square meter. This is a really good paper. It's a glossy fine art based paper from Hahnemuller. But essentially what we didn't do is print these patch charts out on the setup day because of time constraint, because of my class and everything, and just the timing to get everything done in general. It just didn't happen before the convention floor closed down. So this leads us to day one of the convention. We got everything already somewhat set up. I have taken my new 16-inch MacBook Pro, and amazingly enough, with this computer, I have two partitions set up. One of them is the primary Monterey partition. The other one is a beta partition. Now, the primary Monterey partition has one big issue, is that Epson print drivers would not install on this machine. And on these new Macs, you can't just go in to add a printer and expect, for example, Epson or Canon printer to work. What you have to do is download the driver from the website still, which is the whole thing they're trying to avoid. But if you just add it to the computer, what it's going to give you is an AirPrint driver. An AirPrint driver does not allow you the granular controls that we need for a photography workflow. So what do I have to do? Knowing that the way how Epson operates nowadays, and I can't say this for Canon, but I know what Epson does, and what Epson will tell you to do is download this installer. Fantastic. So you download the installer, you try to install it, and then it downloads the driver. If you're listening to this video, Epson, one thing that I would like you to do is to just release the driver without the installation. That is definitely not needed. And this philosophy goes for other software companies too that makes drivers. Seriously, don't make me download an installer for me to download the drivers. Just give me the driver so I can package it and take it on the road with me. Because when I'm at a convention like this, for instance, I'm lucky that they now have internet. And by the way, it did took us a while for us to have all internet in the convention at a decent speed, but the speed was still slow. So number one, what I had to do was boot out of my primary partition and boot into the beta partition in order for me to install the printer driver. So I had to do that. That's the first thing. Now on that separate partition, we were trying to do Lightroom tether capture. And it worked to a certain extent. Number one, that on these new M1 Macs, well, Lightroom tether capture has not been a feature that's running native on M1 machine yet, so we have to relaunch it in Rosetta. The other problem is that I never installed Creative Cloud on that partition for the beta one, so essentially Lightroom didn't really launch and it wanted to quit because Creative Cloud wasn't there, so I had to go through and download the Creative Cloud installer and then also Lightroom Classic to install on that beta partition that's running on the clean install, which is the the latest version of software, to get everything going. And throughout that process, I also brought an M1 MacBook Air, so I tried to pull that out to use. And I was thinking, well, if this one can't set up with the printer, what we can do is shoot into this machine, tether capture to this one, and then use the M1 MacBook Air as the printing machine. That didn't work because Lightroom Auto Import does not like to review folders that are on a network. So that was pretty much a big no-no on the program. So that failed. So then we tried to use the MacBook Air M1, which I do have, like I said, I've carried multiple devices with me. I plan ahead quite a bit. So we tried to use the MacBook Air M1 as the primary capture machine, but we could not get the computer to sync up to the camera to talk to my Nikon D850. And it works fine with this M1 Max, 16-inch MacBook Pro. So we're back to square one. So the whole thing, the first 2 hours a day, that we thought that would be so simple that I can just print this out, scan this in, and create a custom profile for the paper that we're using, didn't really quite work out as planned. So the entire day, on the first day, if you got a print at the convention, you may be one of the lucky ones that we were using a handed meal profile that's provided from their website. So this is using one of their canned profiles on our printer. But to get us to that point, to get us to the end of the day today, was just about 2 to 2.5 hours of just constantly troubleshooting and really working through the problem, one problem after another. And it is exhausting because when you're trying to do these problem solving, I mean, my good friend Kevin is really constantly asking me, like, how can I help? And it's really difficult for me to say because, and we have a talk about this, it's not something that you can that someone can actually come out and help, because it's a process that you have to go through in a sequential order, in a serial order. And there's not, for instance, like, you can solve the problem 2 steps ahead or 3 steps ahead. It's not something that can be done that way. But I just want to share this experience with you from my first day at WPPI. And like I said, we got everything working perfectly. The print is matching really close to display, even with just the can profile. It's just really uncanny how great it looks, but it's refining all those things. The other thing that kind of just failed or didn't work correctly too was one of my Godox lights that I've got. I got the 8200 Pro, and for some reason it just didn't want to fire correctly. The ready light was blinking red. Something's going on. I haven't looked up what that error means yet. It could be the battery, so we just swap it to the backup unit and we just kind of ran with it. There's a lot of things that happen. Oh, and one more thing that happens on the first day at WPPI too, that shares with this frustration, is that I have a Peak Design backpack, and this is nothing on Peak Design, but I'm going to show you something right now. All right, so this is the Peak Design backpack. This is a 30-liter one that I carry me. This is the version 2, which is good. I also have a MacBook Air in addition to the MacBook Pro. It's crazy making. And I have my camera put in here. This is my D850, like so, with a 24-70 like that. And the reason why I store this, and I also have a stroller bag, but I don't want to put my camera in the stroller bag, is because I really want to just drag that bag, and I don't really like the vibration happening on there. So I want to keep my camera, to help preserve like the autofocus system and not having it go through that much vibration. Well, as we were also exiting the trade show floor at the end of the day, something amazing happens. Well, this flap never got shut. The camera got sling on the shoulder. Things didn't drop out right then because I usually sling it from this side first. So this open side was just facing up. So as we're walking, exiting the convention floor, walked probably like past a few ballrooms. Literally, my camera, I just heard this big thunk, and I looked back, and my Nikon D850 fell to the ground. It bounced a little bit, and essentially I saw some piece of plastic. It broke a little bit of like the lens cap, and then it also definitely made a big dent on the lens hood, and also some broken metal part on the lens barrel itself. Now the lens still focused. It still works just fine. The focus ring is not quite as smooth as it used to be, but it's not that bad. There's no cracked glass or anything like that. I'm worried if the bayonet mount is actually bent or not, so we shall see. But yeah, this is my journey through first day at WPPI. Anyway, like I said, it all ends well, but this goes to tell us that we can plan as much as we want. I mean, I have so many duplicate cables, so many duplicate chargers. I have connections for even just basic network connections, because we did try that and it did fail. And sometimes it's always a good idea to just set everything up before, break it down and bring it here. But Also, the other thing was that the printer itself is from BenQ. I didn't have these papers, so I would not be able to do the profiling and everything on them before anyway. So everything kind of has to happen on the spot. But it's how you go through those challenges and how you just, really go through and solve those problems that I think is important. Oh, and by the way, while I'm going through all these first 2 hours of problem solving, we couldn't obviously do portrait or do the headshot thing. So we told some that wants a headshot to come back. But I was also answering customer questions during the same time, which is great. Overall, it was a really fun experience. But I just want to share this with you that, yes, despite how much you plan and everything you have done, things can still fail. But at the end of the day, it can still also be okay. So anyway, stay cheery, stay happy, stay positive, and rarely does my channel ever do anything like this, so this is a fun thing to kind of just talk about in general. I hope you find this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, any thoughts about this, please leave in a comment below. Oh, and by the way, before I finish this whole thing up, for those of you that stopped by the booth or came to my program, I appreciate it so much. Thank you. And especially those of you who follow my channel, it's just like, hey, I know you. I just want to come say hi in person. You have no idea how much I genuinely appreciate that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. Anyway, subscribe if you haven't yet. Click on the notification bell if you haven't done so. And until next time, in Art We Trust.